Hi, it's Amanda with Always in Love. We're here with an interview of someone kind of really special for us, Kate Canterbary. Tasha and I actually both met after reading Kate's books in her group and became friends after that. So it's kind of really special to have Kate here. We really appreciate it. So thank you for joining us, Kate.
No problem.
So we're kind of just going to kick it off. I know your time is important, so we're just going to jump right into the questions and
Sure.
hopefully you can get some sleep. So the first question, I do some rapid fire, and then Natasha has some questions for you. We also got some questions from people from your group.
Okay.
So don't blame us if those are kind of out there questions. So I'm going to start with a rapid fire.
Okay.
What is your favorite word?
Fuck.
What is your least favorite word?
There are a lot of them, but I feel like leverage has to be the one because I feel like people use it so inappropriately.
Okay, so you kind of answered this one, but what's your favorite curse word? I know you like to string random ones together.
So I do, but I'm also a fan of cunt. Like I feel like I've been using it for a long time and I've been on the forefront of that word. But yeah, I'm all for it.
Okay. So what is your favorite movie?
It's The Girl Next Door. It's the one about the porn star. Like, I love that movie, and I have absolutely no rational reason for it. It's just a charming movie. And yeah.
It really is. That's surprisingly one of my favorite ones as well. It's kind of, I don't know why. I can't explain it. It's not the best
thing. It hits a lot of notes, and it's charming. And he trips on ecstasy at one point. It's great.
So what is one thing about yourself that would surprise us?
I think it's that I am actually a lot more quiet than I think most people give me or would anticipate. Like I could actually go many days without speaking to people. And I can go many days without venturing outside of my home and not actually feeling any hermit mania as a result. So it comes and goes for me.
So what profession other than your own would you like to attempt? Yours or your secret?
I would love to do something that's like really creative, like baking. There was one point in my life where I was like super lost and confused, and I was like, I'm gonna decorate cakes, and that lasted for about 4 days, and then it was over. But I would love doing something that fun.
What is one profession that you would absolutely hate to do?
I would not want to be a career politician. I don't mind the life behind the career politician, but I would not want anyone to ever go through my Twitter feed and then publicize that or be able to look at any of my emails. It would just today alone would be shameful.
Who is your celebrity crush?
It's mostly Zac Efron, and I felt badly about that for a very long time. I felt like inappropriate about that. That was my first inkling that I had reached the point of being a dirty old lady, and I wasn't. I mean, I tell people I'm 28. I'm not 28, but that I had a conflict around seeing a guy who had been in High School Musical and being like, "Wow, you could wash clothes on that belly."
Okay, so who is your favorite boy band? New, current, old, whatever.
So I like One Direction, and it took me a long way around to that. Like I really wasn't there at the beginning, but I'm definitely there now.
Yeah, definitely. That's the same thing. They're not my favorite. NSYNC, always, forever. But One Direction, I can see it. I don't understand why, but I can see it.
Yeah, and I want to comb the hair of almost all of them. Like I want to bathe them and clean them up, and then they'll be okay. But they're adorable.
Yeah, I feel like you do that to me because my hair looks like that 95% of the time. I can't do anything with it. That's why I have the hat on. So, what's your favorite TV show?
It's The West Wing. There's never been anything that has just been so perfect in creation incarnation for me. Although there have been others that have certainly tried, and I really wish that The West Wing was like on in heavy rotation the way that the Mindy Project is, or Friends, because that would be good for my life. It would give me hope. Everyone needs an Andrew Bartlett speech from time to time.
Oh, love Andrew Bartlett.
Right.
What are your favorite foods?
There are just so many of them. It's just so hard to choose, because there's bread and everything in the bread family, and then there's cheese and everything in the cheese family, and then there's all the pastries, and then there's fruit and vegetables, and those are lovely too. It's everything. Although I think it probably condenses down to like tacos and pizza, because I am a frat boy.
So on that note, what's your favorite pizza topping?
I think green peppers. I don't know. I think I was like a very impressionable girl in high school, and I had a friend who wanted green peppers and mushrooms on a pizza one day, and I was like, that's life. So I'll do that. And I just haven't shaken it since.
What is your favorite reality TV show?
Oh, Jesus. I feel like the word reality is so skewed. I say it, but I do enjoy the plasticity of the Kardashians. Like they don't even pretend that they're not just about selling their shit. And that's great. Like everybody else, like the people who have 7 kids and say, "Oh, come watch me have a reality TV show and a fake happy marriage." Like, no. No, at least the Kardashians, like they roll out of bed with 7 layers of makeup on, and you buy it because it's their lifestyle.
What temperature would you set your thermostat in a perfect world?
Well, if I was allowed to do that in my home, it would probably be somewhere between like 68 and 70, but I am not allowed to make those changes because apparently I get too hot at night and turn it down to 54, and then too cold during the day and turn it up to 85, and my husband has a problem with some of this, so I am not allowed.
If you could pick one person to pick their brain for a day, who would it be?
There are just so many people. I think I'd love to just talk to Oprah because, she's such a crazy character, but somehow has figured out so many things while still not having most things figured out. Like she's very transparent about like what it is that she has not figured out. And I would just love to find a way to understand how it is that she balances all of that in her head. Because most of the time when I'm like, well, I've figured it all out, but then here's the list of 79 things I don't understand, I then go down the path of saying, oh, no, I have nothing figured out. So I would just love to know how she manages all of that.
What was the last song that stuck in your head?
It's this goddamn motherfucking Cake by the Ocean. I have had this fucking song in my head for, I think, the year. Like 2016 is going to go down in history for me as the year that I had that song in my head all the time. I'll be driving along and it's the one that comes on every single motherfucking channel. And it's like, I have satellite radio. It's absurd. It's shameful.
What is your favorite beverage?
I am a slave to like plain green tea. Like I can go through a tremendous amount of green tea and like still be very happy with it. Like my husband will get me green tea from Starbucks and he'll just be amused that I am as happy with that one as the 9 others I drank that day.
Puppies or kittens?
Puppies. I am tragically allergic to kittens. Like giant red face allergic, welts on my body, mucus coming out of everywhere allergic.
And I have absolutely no how many questions that I've asked. I lost count. Sorry. Okay. So I'm going to throw one in. What Harry Potter house are you?
So Pottermore tells me, and I don't believe that this is accurate, But Pottermore tells me that I would be Hufflepuff. And I can't conceive of a world in which that is accurate. I feel like I am either Ravenclaw or Gryffindor. And I mean, there have probably been days when I was Slytherin, but I think it's one of those two. I don't even know what it was that was going on in the algorithms that made me Hufflepuff that day.
You know, I had exactly that same problem. It told me I was Hufflepuff, and I was like, there's no way. Anyway, that wraps up the rapid fire questions. Thank you. We'll move on to the more, serious part of the interview with some questions for Natasha.
I get the boring stuff. Well, there's one couple of questions I even asked Amanda. I'm like, Amanda, I don't want to ask this question. And she's like, oh, just ask it. Kate will give us a really amazing answer. And I'm just a chicken shit. So, because, I'm trying not to have total fangirl moment right now. So tell us a little bit about yourself. So why do you write?
So I write to organize the voices in my head. I have had them for an intensely long time. I started writing when I was around, it was before 8th grade. And I wrote probably 60,000 words in a short span of time. Probably the fastest I've ever written anything since then. And I have yet to replicate that speed, which is really fucking annoying. But I wrote basically an early version of the OC or Gossip Girl. And somehow it worked. And I'm pretty sure that there was a Matt Walsh in that story. Like that type of character was there for sure. And so like those were just noises in my head that I think if I had articulated that out loud to anyone, I really would have been getting psychiatric help at that time. And I just sort of kept it to myself. I had a teacher actually who brought it up, who mentioned that like, oh, I see that you write tons of stuff. And of course I had it like typed out and I was doing paper edits, between classes or whatever, because I'm a total nerd. And she was like, well, that's special. It was one of those things that just kind of made it clear that I needed to file that away and focus on more important things. And so all through high school, I worked in newspapers, mostly arts and entertainment newspapers. I really was not interested in chasing breaking news. I did that for about a day and a half. I worked at a Metro newspaper as a summer internship and found myself covering a burning building once. I was like, this is terrible. Please take me back to the concerts and the craft fairs. I don't want to be doing this. I don't want to talk to firefighters. I mean, they weren't nearly as beautiful as we think they are. And so that's where it took me. I mean, in college, I went a different path a bit, but I'd always had these stories in my head, and I kept telling myself and telling my husband and telling people, once I have a moment to sort of sit down, because I found myself in a rather quick, fast-paced environment, I will sit down and write these stories out. And they're like, oh, that's just charming. You do that between painting murals in the kids' bedrooms and baking brownies or whatever. But then I had a baby who, unbeknownst to me, required lots and lots of holding and nursing and walking the halls. And I found myself with these stories suddenly in my head because I wasn't allowed to sleep. And they kept growing and they kept spanning out and getting legs and walking around. And so finally, because it was almost getting to the point where I didn't have the CPU space in my head anymore, I had to just start writing them down. And it was one of those things that I did during like the 3 hours when my husband was home from work at the end of the night. And I was like, okay, well, you can take the infant, because I have had enough infant time, and would just sort of bang it out. And that's how it came to be.
Well, I love it. What is the hardest thing you've had to write so far?
So there are things that are hard that I put off, and there are things that are hard that I run into. And I think the things that I have put off so far have been two things in particular that have been really hard, that I put off until like the last minute. Like I wrote the entire story around it with like a placeholder of please go back here and fix this shit. And the first one was killing Angus. Like I always knew he was going to die. I knew he was going to die in a bad way, and I knew that they were going to have to deal with it in some fashion. And I remember it being like August before that book came out, and it came out in October, and sitting in front of my computer in the middle of the night, like probably 2 a.m. and like sobbing, because even though he's the worst, he's just the worst, like he was still dying. And that was hard. And then I think the thing that I put off until last week was writing Shannon and Aaron coming back together.
Oh, I can't wait now.
That was like, that was a lot, because I think that a lot of people, or perhaps just me, have some experience with separating yourself with somebody because it's not healthy for you, and then finding your way back because it actually can be again. But you know, if you know Shannon, she doesn't make things easy on people, and I respect those two characters a lot, and I didn't want to fuck it up for them. But then I also put off like writing sex. There are times when I'm just like, sexy times here, sexy times there, come back to the sexy times. Like, this is the place where they do the weird stuff, blah, 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 and come back to it. Because I just, and there'll be days when I just write like scene after scene after scene of just sex. And I don't understand how that happens. And I know that my mom and my aunts and people have all been like, well, we're just not going to talk about that. Pretend it doesn't happen.
Well, I'm impressed with all of your research you've put in and all the time you're in, because your books are full of like the school and the music, and I love music and the health because that's my life, and then the science information. So do you spend like so much time researching before you start writing it, or is it research right?
It varies a little bit. So I remember for one book, I think it might have been, no, it was for Shannon's book. I spent probably 3 months reading military books. And so many of them. And I watched the Chris Kyle movie, American Sniper, and I watched a bunch of other things that like kind of traumatized me because I'm a very delicate soul, and like read a whole bunch of things about Navy SEALs and the history of special operations in the United States, none of which actually even went into the book. Like, it just didn't. It wasn't as though I wrote a battle scene or anything, but it still went in there. And I have a friend who lives down the street from me, and I used to work with him, and he is an architect. And I didn't realize it, but he is apparently very attractive in like, you know, the mom circle that I'm in. And I don't know why I didn't notice it, but he is. But I had been sort of gleaning information from him for probably 3 years before I sat down and wrote any of the Walshes. But I also just do a ton of research, and I am a lot like Erin in the sense that there is not a topic that I am not somehow interested in. So, you know, she makes a lot of obscure references to random things, and many of them are either ones that like I actually do make on a regular basis, or they're ones that I was like, well, she should definitely reference something like croissants right here, because that is the most random thing, and thus go find some information. So it varies.
I follow you on Instagram, or stalk you, I should say. How do you get like in your writing zone? Is it like, do you have to have a place of zen, or they just start talking and you just have to start typing it all out?
So I think there are two different pieces for me, at least there. One is I've tried to teach myself, and this goes back to when I was working in newspapers, that you don't have the luxury of, you know, getting into a spot to write stuff, because if you have a deadline in 35 minutes, you have to hit it, and that's the end of the story. So like I was used to basically sitting in the back of a state fair and writing down on a notebook a quick summary of whatever concert or event that I was seeing, and being able to block everything out. And in my secret agent life, I did a lot of traveling and was often between offices and would have to just sit in a coffee shop and work for 6 hours straight to get whatever I needed done. So I can do that. But at the same time, I also find myself struggling to, if I don't hear the voice of the people that I'm writing about, then I kind of stare at the blank page for a little while and make it worse for myself. So that's when I just force myself to write something amusing. Like I'll just write a scene with Riley. I'm like, okay, when would Riley walk in? And then it gets better. Because he's easy to write. He's easy to write him being charming and hilarious. So it's a confluence of both.
That's kind of cool. So why did you choose this genre? And then when did it all like, okay, now I want to get this book, I want to get this book published?
So I don't think I really started reading romance in its purest sense until probably the past 10 years or so. And there was a period of time in my life where I was between big projects, and my local library, when I lived in Arizona, had just the most amazing stock of books. And they had every Nora Roberts book ever read. And somehow I had not read her up until that point. And that was like 2006, 2007. And within a year or so, blew through every single one of her books. And there's just something really lovely about romance novels. Like there's something hopeful. And I think that I probably found them in a place in my life where I wanted some hope and wanted to believe that like the world could be a good place and that positive things could work out. And I think that there's nothing wrong with that. Like, there's nothing wrong with wanting books that have wonderful endings or take you on an emotional journey. And prior to that, I read a lot of women's literature, of chick lit, and liked that a lot. And I think I liked that a lot because it is the examination of yourself and your environment through some sort of external force or internal force. And I like that. Like my books are not about, mysteries or intrigue or gunfights or whatever. I don't think I could even manage that. But it is about people dealing with their own shit and other people's shit too. So you got a great big shit show and make it some, way that you can survive. And I think that is really interesting. So that is what brought me there. And I think, the desire to publish, I have to presume it goes back to like knowing from the time that I was like 15 years old that like I could write stuff and it show up in a newspaper. It can show up publicly, and that it has some redeeming qualities, even though I have probably an irresponsible number of meltdowns about my own work at an alarming rate. To which my husband has decided that he's just going to record his responses and play them back to me because apparently I have the same meltdowns every single time I write a book, and it's getting, according to him, old. So I guess I just thought that, like, yeah, put it out there, see what happens, and hope for the best.
Do you listen to the music while you're writing, or do you come up as you're writing? Do you come up with your playlist? Because I really like some of the playlists are almost, it fits the story and what's going on, and that's what I love music. So for me, the playlist tells me the story too.
Yeah. So some of it is that I know the feel of the story before I put the words down. Like I know like this is going to happen, they're going to go there, and this terrible thing's going to happen, and it's going to get stressful, and then it's going to get better, then it's going to get more stressful, and then it's going to end. And like I know how it's going to feel, and I'm like, oh, that song and that song and that song, they're all going to feel the right way. And so I put that together. But then sometimes I'm writing along and say, oh, we need to add something here. And then there are other times when like I cannot listen to music at all, and I just have to like go very silent and just sort of bang it all out.
What do you say is your most interesting writing quirk?
I don't know if it's super interesting, although it does go against the rest of my working styles, is that I am still an on paper kind of girl. So like I print the whole damn thing out and I write my markups and I put my own little flags on here to go back and revise it, and there's somehow like I don't see some of the errors, or I don't recognize that I've used the same phrase 8 times, or that somehow I've said something totally illogical across pages. And other times that I circle stuff and say, fix this shit. So I am like an on paper person, even though I broke up with like a paper and pencil notebook calendar a long time ago. I do just about everything else digitally, even though like most people have some paper pencil. I am, for the most part, 100% digital these days, except for printing out 400 pages 2 or 3 times during the production of a book.
Yeah, I'm that bad person too. I work on no energy and I print. I have to have paper. I have to touch. So, do you hear from
the people at my coffee shop know now that like what part of the book I'm at, because when they see the paper, they know that I'm done writing and I'm just editing.
So they just increase your coffee intake by then.
They don't even ask me if I want to refill. They just bring it.
You have them trained.
Yeah.
Do you hear from us readers a lot?
It varies. Sometimes yes, and then sometimes there's like a dark night of the day where I hear nothing for a long time. But I do, and I hear some lovely things. Like I've heard a lot of feedback, in particular from the 5th book, around people who experienced loss in trying to conceive, and I think that that's what I've heard the most about. But I've also heard a lot from people who experience health issues similar to Sam, and or any type of chronic health issue where they feel as though either they or their child or their spouse has experienced something along those lines, and it is just unusual or reassuring, I suppose, to see someone who has those conditions and is able to have their happy ever after.
What is the most surprising thing you've learned in creating your Walsh series and your books?
I think the most surprising thing that I've found is that, and I guess I should not be surprised by this because I knew it ahead of time, but that the female character who does not always lend herself to being the best friend girl next door can be a hard sell. And so I was pretty intentional about writing characters who were not like Susie, super angel next door, who was just beautiful and everything that she did and everything she touched was magical and people loved her and she made her own salad dressing and things like that. Like I wanted to write characters who were a little fucked up, because I'm sorry, but I don't know any women like that. Like even the ones who I looked to as just being like the most together women are also like, I haven't changed my bra in 3 weeks. So, like there has to be some sort of in between. Like I feel like they're out there, and I feel as though I struggle a lot with finding women who are strong and who have reached a certain level in either their profession or their personal life where they just don't take a whole lot of shit, and people accepting them as women also who deserve a happy ending, who deserve, to feel desired and wanted and soft in different ways. And then, to sort of balance that against, like, they can also be hard, prickly cactuses. So that has been interesting to me, to see the way that people respond to women who don't necessarily have the same range of girl next door, best friend, that characteristic.
That's probably why I like the women so much, because they're more relatable to me. Okay, so here's my one question that I'm just cringing to ask you. Out of all of your male characters, who would you marry, who would you kill, and who would you fuck?
Oh my God.
You can also add friend.
Friends instead of,
feel like I'm choosing my favorite child, and I only have one child, so I know how, I can't even imagine how difficult that is. So I feel like I would probably kill Matt. Like I love all of them. I love all of them. I'd probably kill him just because he makes it too easy. Like he makes it too easy on you. And I'd probably marry Patrick. I feel like I did marry Patrick. And I married Patrick, and I'm the person who constantly asks, like, what are you thinking? What's going on? What do you want to talk about? And he's like, so I should somehow know better, but I don't. And, you know, and I think Will, I mean, I have heard so many people say to me in perhaps awkward ways that they would just tear the shit apart with Will. You know, and like, he's the kind of guy who would break a bed with you, and that's lovely. Like, everyone should have one of those moments in their life.
Oh, I'm just having visualization, sorry. What authors do you like to read, and what books have like been strong influences for you?
So I think Nora Roberts was a good influence for me a long time ago. I loved some of the books that she wrote, like the Quinn brothers books that were mostly male driven. Mm-hmm. And those were just, it kind of showed me that you can actually write books from the perspective of guys and it be a good story still. Emily Giffin is someone who I loved her early work in a like sensational way, I remember this avalanche of feelings that I had when I read Something Borrowed, in like just a messy, sloppy, avalanche-y kind of way, where I was like, I don't even understand what I'm thinking right now. And I wasn't cheating on my best friend with her fiance. Like, it was just still one of those books that was so many things in your head. And then there are some books, like I love Christina Lauren books. I feel like those were ones that helped me see I can write books with like sassy ass women and guys who are assholes, but not all the way. So those are ones that I really enjoy. I love Lorelei James. I don't know how it was that I came across her, because I don't read cowboys. I don't read Western things. That doesn't even enter my mind, but I did, and I somehow read every single one of her books ever, and it was fantastic. And I learned so much about ranching. I thought that was sensational.
Oh, that's great. Okay, is it hard to be a secret agent? I mean, do you feel like your friends and family have embraced you like the fans have?
So it is very interesting. So in terms of being a secret agent, like that is a lot. And I've scaled back from secret agenting quite a bit, and it's been a lovely shift. But it was very difficult for about a year when I felt like I had to be super cautious about what I said or where I was. And I was like, God forbid I tag myself in a location and, you know, signals cross and worlds collide, and the world will end for me. But it's better now. And for my family, so they did not know that I was writing books until like this time last year. And like, I had my reasons. Not that they wouldn't be supportive, whatever, like I had my reasons. And, you know, in part, it was, I just didn't know that these books were going to go anywhere. Like, I sincerely thought that, like, I'd write some books and put them out there, and nobody would give a shit. And then, like, a whole bunch of them sold, and so I had to do something about that. So, you know, it was great, actually, because my sister knew about this all along, or most of the time, and I gave her, on Christmas morning, a set of signed books. And my mother looks at her as she's opening these books and says, "Isn't that porn?" So, and I said, "No, as a matter of fact, it isn't. And let me tell you something." And my family has a lot of Walshism in them, in that there's a whole bunch of them, and they're just incredibly noisy. And they just say whatever they're thinking. And so Christmas dinner last year, there's like 18 people around the table. And my mother, you know, after deciding that it's not really that much porn, tells them a bit about what's going on. And they had some colorful commentary. I'll just say that. And, whenever I see them now, like I have an uncle who will just say, so how's the porn business? And he's not joking that much. So it was hard, like having these secret lives for a bit, where it was, I had a secret life professionally from like my profession and then writing. Then I had a secret life for my family and writing. And it is so much easier that I have fewer secret lives now.
I applaud you for keeping that. That'd be tough to be a secret life.
There was 1 or 2 moments where I would tweet something from the wrong account, and like my entire life would flash before my eyes, and I was like just dying to fix it or correct it. And like those like tiny single seconds that would pass by just felt like way too many. But I've employed some safeguards since then.
What is your favorite positive saying?
Everything is going to be okay. Like I honestly like will wake up sometimes in the morning and just say everything's going to be okay. Everything is going to be okay. It's going to be fine. It is going, and if it isn't fine, then it will be fine tomorrow. And I don't know why, but that has just managed to get me through many years. That and just like, fuck this shit.
That's pretty much what I say every day. Or douche canoe. What advice would you give your younger self?
I would just remind myself that like it's gonna be okay, and to just not worry about so many things. I think that, like, at least for me, I wanted everything to work a certain way for a long time, and would just kind of die on hills and vines everywhere wanting it to be that way, and at the expense of sometimes even acknowledging the moment that was happening. And so, like, I was a slave to a BlackBerry back when those things existed, and no one has time for that shit. No one is going to die and say, damn it, I should have returned emails more efficiently.
For your own reading, do you prefer the paper or do you prefer, your ebooks?
I went hard to ebooks a couple years ago, probably right around the advent of the Kindle, and it surprised me. And I know a lot of people who think of me, just as me as an individual person, not even as a writer, but like thinking of me as very bookish and like wanting books and hoarding books and such, and they cannot reconcile that with a Kindle or an iPad, which is so fascinating to me. But having a little kid means that you very much are a paper reader because it's storybooks and so forth. So in that way, it's actually really nice that like my books all fit into a device, because when you have a toddler, it's fuck all, disasters everywhere, right on everything.
Yep.
And I don't even know what would happen if I had like the same quantity of paperbacks that I did like back in 15 years ago, because she would tattoo them all with her artwork.
Yeah, I understand those days. That's all I have on my fun stuff, and now we have some great questions from our Walsh group. Amanda, do you want to tackle some of those?
Well, I have a kind of story question before we go. So I like to refer to myself as kind of the OG stalker. Like when underneath
That's
it all,
fair.
and
That's fair.
Basement Twins came out, I was pretty much hardcore stalker. I forced Kate to be my friend. Not gonna lie. I tweeted her, a whole bunch, and, just constantly whatever. And so that brings me to, what is your craziest fan story? Like, what, have you had any crazy incidents?
Yeah. So I think one of them, again, it probably isn't that crazy, but it just sort of sticks out to me as like overwhelming, is that and it wasn't even that long ago, I got a message from someone who had a very, very like wonderful, positive experience with the books, but had a very strong vision for what should happen to Riley, and had a strong vision for the body type and race of the woman that Riley should have. And I didn't know how to respond to it. I just kind of looked at it and I nodded and I'm like, I'll come back to this. And I didn't come back to it apparently quickly enough, because I got another message, explaining that, if I did not want this feedback, then I shouldn't have, put my email address at the back of the book. But like reaffirming that Riley needed to have this type of woman and that this was what was right for him. And so that was, it was a fascinating message. And it was very detailed about the woman for Riley.
And I know you recently started going to signings and things like that. Have you had any sort of in-person crazy fan encounters?
So, I mean, I know that signing events are just, they're crazy times because they're loud and sometimes they're really hot and they're very crowded and there's a lot of stuff. Like if you are at all someone who gets like visually overwhelmed, like you have too much stimuli around you, a signing is the worst place in the world. And I am not usually that person, but there are so many banners and there are so many things and there's like lines and everyone has a trolley and it's a lot. And so I know that everyone responds to that differently. There was this one moment at a signing this past spring where a gal came up to my table, looked as sweet as could be, and I had an assistant there with me who, thank God, is fantastic with small talk, because I was just like, what's up? And my sister was there and she was just sort of, asking this person questions. The person did not respond. Like a minute went by, no response. She's standing there at the table. My sister was like, hey, how are you? Who have you seen today? What's going on? No response. I just looked at my sister like, what do I do right now? And the gal just like walked away. So I assume that she was just as overly stimulated by the event as I was and everybody else. And like there was a megaphone and it was chaos, but that it was just one of those moments that if I didn't have her, I probably would have turned around and gotten another author to help me. It's like, who's the adult in this situation? Because this gal is just staring at me and I don't know what to do.
Well, yeah, I could see those being a little bit crazy. I've heard some stories that I don't know how I would do in situations like that either.
There was a model at one event who wanted one of my suck my dick pens, and I was like, dude, you don't need the help. Just go upon your way now. No, you don't need any invitations.
So we're going to start. We took some questions from the group. Some of them are structured, some of them are out there, some of them we may have already covered, but I wanted to jump into them anyway. The first one is, what is your inspiration for the Walsh series? I know you've said this a couple times before, but what was the inspiration for writing about the family of architects?
So they weren't the first thing I wrote. I started off writing a book about Nick, and I was having a hard time with it. I was like running into walls and I felt like I am not writing him or the woman in his story the right way. And it was really complicated. It was a really, really complicated story. And their emotional arc was like huge. And so I put it down and I said, I'm going to write something less complicated. And I'm going to back into it in a different way. I'm going to write Nick's friends and then slowly get myself to Nick. And I was like, well, Nick has a buddy. Nick has a jogging buddy, and his jogging buddy's name is Matt. And Matt has a whole bunch of siblings, but he's just like the golden retriever puppy of them. And he is going to meet a gal who's trying to build a school. Because I was, at that time, working with the architect who lives on the street from me, who's apparently quite hot. He's bald hot. Not everyone can pull off bald hot. And so he is an architect who works specifically with schools, public schools, private schools, and charter schools to help them repurpose buildings, because we're in the Northeast and all we have is abandoned buildings here, into spaces for schools. That's really fucking complicated, though. Like, most states have so many requirements and like Department of Environmental Management stipulations that are obscene. Like they're well-intentioned, but very, very ridiculous. And so I was spending a lot of time with this guy and working on stuff. And I was like, well, this gal, she's going to be opening a school, much like I know lots and lots of people do, particularly in regions like Boston. And that is how I will gradually back my way into writing Nick's story. And I'm going to buy myself some time to figure him out better.
Oh, yay.
So the next one is actually, it's from Michelle.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, I remember reading one of your posts a few months ago where Aaron kept talking to you. My question is, how do you know when you're writing your next book how much the characters will talk to you?
I don't. I don't. Shannon didn't speak to me for months. So I finished Necessary Restorations in February of 2015, and it came out in April. And I was like, la-di-da, I'm going to finish this book for April, or I'm going to finish this book by April and have it out in June or July. That didn't happen. Like, it took me probably 6 full months to hear her. And when I did, it was an avalanche. It was so much. But I had to fight to hear Shannon. And it's so ironic because a lot of people feel like, oh, you're just like Shannon. You must know her voice. You're basically writing yourself. And that's not actually the case at all. Like, I might have some of Shannon as a boss because I really fucking hate it when people screw up. And I've given them very clear directions on what to do. I have a huge problem with that. And other things along those lines. But for the most part, I'm not Shannon. And so hearing her was very time consuming. But Erin, I sat down to write Erin, and for some reason she just wanted to write on paper. And so I have like a whole damn notebook full of babble from Erin, half of which I haven't even used because I didn't need it. But she just has had a lot to say.
Wow.
Our next one is from Dawn. Do you impart some of your own idiosyncrasies on your characters? So give a couple examples.
Yeah. And it's always like these tiny things that I feel like are essentially inconsequential, but I still put in there anyway. I will not eat chicken on a bone. I will not. And the thing is, like, so the boy assistant, who most people have heard about, he has never cooked a meal for himself. He has no food in his apartment whatsoever. He orders lunch every single day. And, you know, goes to Dunkin' Donuts for breakfast and eats dinner at a bar someplace every night. But every day for lunch, he gets like chicken wings or some disgusting thing like that. And for years, I've had to sit there and watch him gnaw on bone. It disgusts me to no end. And so like that little bit of Shannon, 100%. You know, and things like how Lauren just feels better when she has like really fancy shoes. Like, I am better at secret agenting when I walk in the room with really fancy shoes on. And there was a period of time when like I was known as the person with just like the good shoes, which I guess professionally that's fine. I'll take that. And so like there's little things like that are in there. But I try really consciously to not make a character me. Like, I'm not telling my story. And so those tiny bits I'm okay with. Like, I actually am not the purple queen, even though there was one day that someone came into my office and I was wearing a purple scarf and I had a purple water bottle and I had the dark chocolate Hershey's Kisses with dark purple wrapped on my desk. And she's like, "You've got a problem here." That was just an instant. It's a one-time deal. But for the most part, it is not like an overwhelming push of me-isms into people.
Our next one comes from Jessica. And she says, you see a lot of Instagram photos and posts regarding food, specifically vegan and clean eating. Is that something you've always been passionate about or something that happened as a result of something else?
So when I was like about 10, I just stopped eating meat of all kind. Like there wasn't an impetus, there wasn't anything meaningful that happened. I just stopped. And I didn't resume until I got pregnant. And it was not really, it was kind of like that scene in Twilight where Bella needs blood. Like, I needed meat. Like, the baby wanted it. And I've not been a meat eater in the 4 years since my kid was born. But I don't know. I feel like my child is non-dairy and non-soy, so there's not a lot of dairy in our house aside from cheese because she just knows that she can't eat it, so it's fine. So I drink a lot of almond milk instead. And, you know, I try as much as possible to make really good choices. And I feel like when I drink like a nice jar of beet juice, I get a ton of energy. You can, however, drink too much beet juice. I discovered that this week. Be mindful about the amount that you drink. Otherwise, you'll send like some texts that make no sense to your husband, and he'll ask if you're having a stroke. So even the good choices can come up and bite you in the ass.
This next question comes from Beth. She's read a couple series with each book focusing on a different sibling, and after all they were completed, they came up with a novella about their lives a couple years later. Is that something you're interested in doing or planning on doing with the Walsh family?
So I have always had this notion that there would be something after Riley's book. What precisely that is, I don't know. And I think that, so as I was writing the last few chapters of Erin's book, I was like, oh shit, I should probably write this epilogue a little more into the future because this game is wrapping up here. And so I've debated, I've gone back and forth on that one, but I think it's possible. I think anything is possible. I think that it has not been possible for me to walk away from these characters. Over the past 6 books, it has been hard to write things that are not them because I feel like, A, there's a really huge desire for the next book, and so writing something that's not them feels disingenuous. But also, like, they're in my head, and they occupy a lot of space. Their timeline, I have made it rather complicated, it seems. So I don't think that I'm just going to be done with them, although I'm definitely not going to invent any long-lost siblings. Like, we're not doing any brothers and sisters style, like, oh, there's another sister, you know. No, we just can't do that. Angus is bad enough.
Okay, so this one comes from Kim. Which character in the book series is most like you and most like your husband?
So my husband is probably a blend of like Matt and Patrick. And it, like, there are days when it's mostly Patrick, and then there are days when it's mostly Matt. It's fair to say that he puts up with a tremendous amount of shit, and just doesn't mind that much. Like, you know, people who say that it's ridiculous that Matt, you know, tolerated all of like Lauren's hemming and hawing, just really come meet my husband, and just get a sense of the things that he tolerates, because, you know, it is possible. But he's also like stoic and grumpy like Patrick, so there's some balance there. For me, I feel like I think there definitely is a perception that there are parts of me in large portion in Shannon, and that's not 100% accurate. I think that it's how and I think that's the difference between how things come across online and how things are in reality. And so, like, there were a lot of moments when people were like, oh my God, you're just like Shannon. And I had to step back and think about that for a bit, because it was like, no, no, like I know that that's not accurate, but I also realize that like some of the things that people hear from me, like about me firing multiple assistants, sounds an awful lot like Shannon or something that she would put up with. And her relationship with the boy assistant, or my relationship with the boy assistant, I know people feel like mirrors Tom in a lot of ways. Boy assistants, like in Tom, are different creatures. Tom is very nice and patient, and the boy assistant is an asshole on most days. And I've said that to him. He's aware of that. Like, I didn't put that in his Harvard recommendation, like, areas to improve, be less of an asshole. It's in there in other words, though. So I think that there's probably more of me in Erin than any other character, but Lauren would have to be the right behind her in small degrees. But you know, when I look at the women, I feel like there are tiny bites of me in different places, and so I guess what that essentially means is that, like, if there was a character based on me, it would be wholly unreadable, because like the things that people do not like about other characters are the things I'm putting in there for myself. So life and art, we don't want them to come together.
So this one comes from Autumn. What made you decide to keep Erin's love interest a secret?
Because Erin is a secret. Because the girl lives like in the shadows. And you know, this isn't something that I address a whole lot in her book, but like in a lot of ways her siblings let her go.
Yeah.
Like she left and they let her. You know, you have to give Matt credit because he kept track of her and he didn't let that go. But throughout 5 books, you only see them sort of grumbling like, okay, where is she? What's the deal? But they let her go. They let her make that choice. And so in that way, they also chose to not be a party to some of her other decisions. And so that's part of where it lives for me. And a little suspense is good for the soul.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, if I told you at the beginning of The Usual Suspects that it was all about Kaiser Sose, like, why would you watch the movie?
So this next one you've kind of answered a little bit. It's from Dawn again. All your female characters are strong yet flawed. You consciously write unconventional yet relatable heroines.
Yeah. Like, I think part of the thing that actually got me to sit down and write some of the stories in my head, aside from the fact that they were there, was that I got frustrated after a certain point of just reading one character after another of really, really perfect people. And you know, and there's one thing that, like, Teal gets hit with a lot of things. One of them is that she didn't automatically befriend Sam's brother's women. You know, she didn't automatically become best friends with Lauren and Andy and Shannon. And there's a lot of static around that. Like, a lot of people saying, well, but she should have. They're lovely. You know, we've come to love them over many years. I would love someone to point out the in-law family dynamic situation where that's the case. Because I know hardly any women who are just best friends with all their sisters-in-laws. I feel like that's the most illogical assumption in the world. And I get that people want, like, everyone's desires for it to come together happily. Like, you want everyone to fold into this beautiful circle, and like, oh, well, if they come together, then that just means that it's all going to stick and bond and be wonderful. But the thing is, like, we don't function that way at all. And so, you know, I feel like it would be disingenuous for me to write a character who didn't in some fashion acknowledge that sisters-in-laws is hard, and that, you know, even if you're just in a circle of friends, you don't always fold in with someone's boyfriend or girlfriend. Like, that's one of the most common things I've ever experienced. And so for me, I didn't want to write just like the good at everything, sweet-hearted woman who none of us are. And I know that sometimes we read because we want to see things played out in a way that is better than us. Like, we want to see a version of us that is better and happier and has a really great sex life, and because it's wish fulfillment. That's why we write guys who are like jacked and have like 29-inch penises, and like, that's awesome. But in real life, you don't always see that. And so like finding that tension between how far can we push the real life boundary to the place where it's still a bit of wish fulfillment is I guess my eternal question.
I think that's why I really like about women is because I have a really interracial family, and I'm not friends with my sister-in-laws. I'm the only girl. So I think that for me, it's very, very relatable and down to earth. And it makes it, we can always have the cookie cutter and cleaver, but in reality, that's not really what happens.
See, and I find that absolutely hilarious because I am the least relatable woman. I don't get along with women at all, but I get along great with all my sisters-in-laws.
You know, and it like there are different like layers to it, you know. I think that I know some people who they don't even do like family. They just do Friendsgiving. They just do like the circle of friends. Even if they have a giant family, they just for whatever reason back out of it. I think there's just so many layers that is. It's also part of what I love about Nick is that he kind of chooses the Walshes over his own family.
Okay, so this is the last one from the group, from Dawn again. Do you know who Riley's love interest will be, or do you have a general idea? And she also asks about Nick's love interest.
So I've had it all planned out for a while, and I think that that's kind of my fatal flaw, if you will, is that I can't go very far unless I know the roadmap. And so I've known the chess pieces since the end of Matt and Lauren's book, and they've been in place since the end of Patrick and Andy's book.
So I have questions that are fan questions that are not part of the group.
Sure.
So the first one is, who would you fangirl over? Like if you went to see them at signing, like who would you absolutely love to meet?
I would really love to meet Margaret Atwood. I know that that's not like even a fun answer at all, but like I would really just love to meet her. And I don't know if that's because I'm like jaded from having been to signings. I'm like, oh, like I peed next to Alice Clayton, so it's all good. Like I don't know. But I feel like I also have a friend who met Margaret Atwood a couple of years ago and was supposed to tell me all about it and then moved and never did, and I'm still a little bit bitter about that.
The other one is if you could have dinner with a group of the same, writers in the genre, who would you pick to have like this great meal with?
So I think I'd have to definitely include Christy Webster because she's a freak. And she's an absolute freak in the very best ways. And I think I'd want to sit down with Erica James. She takes a lot of shit and a lot of people don't even like think of her at first, but I would just love to know how it is that she exists, knowing that there are so many people who write slam pieces about her books and her movies, and not the good kind of slam piece, the other kind. And it's like I'd love to talk to her and just understand how it is that she sort of shakes it off and keeps going. Because even if I've gotten to a place where I truly don't look at reviews and it doesn't, like, I don't think about it, I definitely have it in the back of my mind, like, oh my God, people are not going to like this girl. So I would just be curious because she's written some of the most out there stuff, at least as far as hundreds of millions of people have read.
All right, so my last one is kind of a heavy question, so I apologize. So from everything that we know about Erin and her story and things like that, this is going to be a very emotional book. It's a very, it has a lot of emotion. It has a lot of sisters coming together, reuniting, that kind of thing. How does that kind of play on you as you're writing it? Because I know that you had some emotional things going on at the same time. Was it cathartic, or did it kind of make you think about it? Did it play any part at all?
There are a couple passages from Erin's book that I've had in my head for like an obscenely long time. Erin has some strong opinions about time, and the universe, and some speeches almost about that. And I wrote them a really long time ago because like I tried to go to sleep at night, but I would hear them. And I was like, God damn it, I'm not writing you right now. Go away. But she has really strong opinions for someone who has experienced certain things. And so I wrote them a long time ago, and I think almost wrote an entire first portion of the book around that because I felt like she needed to put this out there about why she thinks that, you know, life is really important. Every minute you have is important. But at the same time, be confronted with the fact that she herself makes choices that don't align with that. That she allows herself to spend her days separated from her family for all intents and purposes. And that, you know, her argument of her central thesis is that time is really important and there isn't enough of it and you don't get any of it back. Why is it that she's okay surrendering so much of it to a war of silence? And so she has to grapple with that. And it was good to write that down. And there were chunks of it that I've taken out that were almost a little too heavy. It was good to get it down. I mean, I hope that people don't reach out to me and say, hey, are you okay? Because I feel like that could happen. I'm fine. But I feel like that is part of it. Like she has a very inward and then outward looking view of the world of like what is happening around her and how the world is changing. That's actually a really big part of why it is that she goes and follows volcanoes, why she goes and follows climate change and things like that. And I don't think I've gotten to the place yet where I can call any of it cathartic because I like need to walk a good couple of paces away from a book before I can get there, and I'm not at that place yet. I said a couple weeks ago I was going to hold on to this book until the last minute, and I'm absolutely certain that that's what I'm doing. I'm absolutely certain that is what I'm doing with this book because I want it to be right, and it's probably going to take me a couple of weeks after it's out to recognize that like all of these things are out there.
Well, we know what's coming next is Erin's book, and I know it's going to be special. Erin's a special character, so I'm looking forward to seeing what happens in her book. We thank you for your time, and we know that Riley's story is coming in this spring. Yep. Do you have any other kind of things on the horizon, anything you're thinking about beyond that, or are we just kind of focused on the Wash for now?
Well, the one thing I can definitely commit to is Riley's book. I can definitely say that that's coming in May 2017. And my husband recently told me that I need to get better about the things in my head, how I organize them and how I decide what to do and what I get emotionally attached to and what I choose to worry about. And so my priority is to get Riley's book finished and then go from there. What happens after that, we will see what happens, or before that, or around that. But he apparently is concerned that I am either drinking too much beet juice or too much coffee or working all night, and that should change. So, and I do have a propensity to have like 20 characters in my head at once. And then, you know, like sit down and write out an outline for their book and like, okay, we're going to do this. And then for some reason, something else gets in my way and I remember, oh, damn it, I have to write Riley's book. So these are all things that I'm trying to work out while, you know, not having my husband divorce me or drinking a toxic level of beet juice again.
Did he come up with the words of calm your tits?
No, calm your tits is, if he told me to calm my tits, we'd have a problem in our marriage. But that came from my sister and I stumbled across some years ago a gangster's recipe for making fudge. And the gangster's recipe for making fudge included taking a bowl of chocolate chips, putting them in the microwave, and you couldn't eat them yet. You had to calm your tits while they cooled off. And my sister and I have just kept that going for a really long time, even past the point in which it was humorous. So that's been something that we carried with us for the years.
So we know about the books that are coming out. What about any signings, any places where people can meet you coming up?
Yes, so I am going to the Talk Books signing outside of Boston, formerly known as the North Shore signing, in April of 2017. I'm also going to the Copa signing in New York on April Fool's Day, actually, 2017. And then I'm going to the Shameless Book Con in a city in Florida.
Orlando.
Oh, okay. This coming fall.
Well, thank you for your time. We really appreciate it. Anything else, Natasha?
No, I am good. I'm done doing my fanning girl moment.
You've been great. We really enjoyed it. Thank you for answering all of our random asked questions.
No problem.
Sorry for taking so long. I mean, it's been almost an hour and a half.
No worries.
So sorry. So sorry.
No worries.
But thank you.
Good.
We'll get the links, everything posted, and thank you again for joining us. We really appreciate it, and we really love your books. So we can't wait for the next one.
Yes, I can't wait.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.